Well, it is a big bill, but it's only beautiful if you're a billionaire or a very wealthy American, because he gives those big tax breaks to very wealthy people at the expense of everybody else in America. We've heard of the cuts to Medicaid and food and nutrition programs, and the fact that even after that it will drive a huge upward hole in our deficit. But there's one billionaire that President Trump is especially focused on making sure does well, and that's himself and his family and his family's business. And we've seen a great example of that corruption here at home with the meme coin, right? This is the coin that Trump put together, and he said that he's going to reward the people who buy the most of this meme coin by meeting with him personally at his golf course in Virginia. And so people all over the world scurried to purchase that meme coin in order to get an audience with the president, because having an audience with the president means you get a chance to influence the president. And many people from around the world, including China, purchased those meme coins to buy that influence. And people should understand that the president's business makes money, whether the value of that meme coin goes up or whether it goes down. Every time there's a transaction to buy or sell that meme coin, the Trump business makes money. So other people can get totally hosed, but it's a win-win for President Trump and his family. In fact, it's estimated that in the early days of launching this, they made about $350 million. So that's the meme coin here at home. What brings us to the floor today is how this personal corruption is infecting the foreign policy of the United States. Because all of us hope and expect that when a president of the United States goes overseas to conduct American foreign policy, they have the interests of America first. Donald Trump says it himself, America first. That's not what President Trump has foremost in his mind when he travels overseas. What he has foremost in his mind right now is the bottom line for his personal profit, literally selling the office of the presidency. You might as well open the White House and make it an Airbnb. So let's talk about the details of how this is unfolding and how it's hurting the United States of America. On his first major overseas trip, Donald Trump went to 3 countries in the Middle East, Gulf countries. Went to Saudi Arabia, he went to the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, and he went to Qatar. Now, normally before the President of the United States takes one of these important overseas trips, they send out the diplomats to help work out important U.S. foreign policy objectives and goals with these countries to make sure that the interests of the United States of America are put first. In the case of this trip to these 3 Gulf countries, again, the first major overseas trip President Trump took, it was his son, Eric Trump, who went out to the region 2 weeks in advance. And what did Eric Trump do when he was there? Was he talking about foreign policy? No. He was talking about doing deals for the Trump family business. And so let's zero in on some of the deals that he worked on. Let's start by what happened in Qatar, because it was about 2 weeks before President Trump arrived there that Eric Trump worked with Qatar to partner the Trump Organization on a $5.5 billion Trump-branded golf course and real estate development deal. It should be pointed out that Qatar has also invested over $1 billion in a private equity fund for Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, in a deal announced in 2024 after Donald Trump's most recent election victory. And now, as Senator Murphy pointed out, then Trump asked Qatar to give him, as a gift, this jumbo jet plane to use as Air Force One and potentially to keep for later on as part of his presidential library. And so Qatar, for the reasons that Senator Murphy indicated, felt apparently compelled to comply with this wish from the President of the United States. The President of the United States has a lot of influence in the region. And Qatar has been on the losing end of that influence in the first Trump administration. And so Qatar gave Donald Trump, at Donald Trump's request, a $400 million jumbo jet, what the president calls the palace in the sky. It's complete with a 55-inch TV, leather sofas, wood paneling, the works. And during this whole period of time, Qatar has also wanted to make sure it establishes a solid relationship with the United States and specifically with the Trump administration. And the Trump administration had noticed a major arms sales to Qatar, $1.9 billion weapon package, complete with Predator drones, 500-pound bombs, and Hellfire 2 missiles. So all of this gets caught up together in the major corrupt deals that are being put forth in order to enrich the Trump family, not advance the national security interests of the United States. Now let me turn to the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, because in this case, the corruption is at least as bad, probably more so. So once again, in the case of the UAE, before President Trump went to the region, it wasn't the State Department emissaries that went out, it was Eric Trump on behalf of the Trump family businesses. In this case, it was a new cryptocurrency stablecoin enterprise launched by the Trump family called World Liberty Financial. Now, World Liberty Financial is 60% owned by the Trump family. As Senator Murphy pointed out, one of the co-founders is actually Zach Witkoff, a last name that you might know because his dad, Steve Witkoff, is Donald Trump, President Trump's major Middle East envoy, going to places like Qatar as part of the Middle East negotiations with both respect to Iran and Gaza. So 2 weeks before Donald Trump goes to the region, his son Eric Trump goes on behalf of the family business along with Zach Witkoff, the son of the president's special Middle East envoy. So what happens when Eric Trump, the president's son, goes to the UAE? Well, they soon after announced that MGX, which is a UAE government-backed investment firm, would use Trump's new stablecoin called USD1 for $1, to close a new $2 billion investment in the cryptocurrency exchange Binance. So by putting $2 billion into the Trump stablecoin enterprise, putting that into circulation, the UAE turned an unknown stablecoin company into one of the biggest players in the world overnight. Overnight, the value of that company shot up with the action that the UAE took with the $2 billion. And the Trump family stands to make tens of millions of dollars every year from that deal alone. Now, Mr. President, I doubt that the Emirati investment firm went with a Trump-branded cryptocurrency for its $2 billion investment because Eric Trump put together the best slide deck for the pitch meeting. Somehow, I think it's because he was the son of the President of the United States who was going to be arriving in the UAE 2 weeks later. So I want everybody to hold that deal in their head. Just put a pin in it for a minute. right? Eric Trump, President's son, goes to the UAE 2 weeks before President Trump arrives and does this crypto deal, $2 billion crypto deal. So 2 weeks later, the President of the United States arrives in the UAE. And what happens? President Trump gives away some of the most sensitive, advanced American technology. In fact, the crown jewels of American AI technology and semicomputers. The previous administration, President Biden, had restricted the flow of this very sensitive AI technology to places like the UAE because of a fear of what's known as diversion, that technology would not be safe in the hands of the UAE without really important safeguards in place. Because the UAE has a partnership with the United States, but it also has very close relations with China, the PRC. And so there's been well-documented concern about the real risk that very sensitive American AI technology would go to China. I would also point out that the UAE has made it its ambition to become one of the AI leaders in the world, and so they obviously will benefit greatly from getting the very best technology, the highest compute power that the United States can provide them. Now, interestingly, it was the day before President Trump departed to the UAE and Qatar and Saudi Arabia that the Trump administration rolled back the important safeguards the Biden administration had placed on the transfer of this very sensitive AI technology. They rolled it back as the president was about to take off to go visit the UAE. Now, this deal that was cut agreed to lift its limitations on the transfer of this technology really does compromise the national security interests of the United States. Mr. President, a group of us wrote a letter led by Senator Warren. It was signed by Leader Schumer, also by the ranking member of the Armed Services Committee, Senator Reid, the ranking member of the Intelligence Committee, Senator Warner, Senator Coons, and others. And here's what we wrote. These deals greenlight the sale of sensitive U.S. technology in exchange for illusory promises of foreign investment. If completed, they will present an immediate threat to U.S. national security and, over the long term, may irreversibly erode U.S. leadership. After the UAE said it would invest $2 billion in the Trump family business crypto exchange, letting that skyrocket to very valuable levels. I will point out, Mr. President, that it wasn't only Democrats who have expressed concern about the risks of transferring this sensitive AI technology to the UAE. In fact, during the Biden administration, the Republican chairman of the House Select Committee on China wrote to the president, actually wrote to the president's then National Security Advisor, Jake Sullivan, expressing exactly these kind of concerns. It was a letter dated July 10th, 2024. It's a short letter. Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that it be entered in the record.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. Now, here's an important thing for everybody to understand. When Eric Trump went 2 weeks before Donald Trump's trip, and when he did that deal where a UAE-owned company put $2 billion into the Trump family stablecoin business, that was with a company called MGX. The chairman of that company is a member of the royal family. His name is Sheikh Tahnoon. He's also known as TBZ. He's a real entrepreneur, and he does look out for the interests of the UAE. So he does this deal with Eric Trump, but guess what else he's the chairman of? He's the chairman of G42, which is the, again, Emirati state-owned business that cut the AI deal with the Trump administration. So the guy who's the chairman of the company that put $2 billion into the Trump family stablecoin business is also the chairman of the company G42 that was the beneficiary of Donald Trump's giveaway of very sensitive U.S. AI technology. Now look, when it comes to Sheikh Tahoon, you know, I've met him. He's a good businessman. He was looking out for the interests of the UAE when he got that deal where the United States government will give the UAE all this AI technology. So he was looking out for the interests of the UAE. The problem is that it was President Trump who wasn't looking out for the interests of the United States of America. He was looking out for the interests of his family business and literally gave away this sensitive technology 2 weeks after the UAE invested $2 billion in the Trump family newly launched stablecoin. And at the same time, like in the Qatar situation, this was accompanied by a request from President Trump for a $1.3 billion arms sale to the UAE. Now, Mr. President, that arms sale is part of the overall corrupt bargain that the Trump administration struck with the UAE. It also ignores what the UAE is doing right now as we speak with respect to the terrible war and conflict in Sudan. Because the UAE has been sending weapons to an organization, a murderous organization called the Rapid Support Forces. The Rapid Support Forces have been engaged in all sorts of atrocities. And during the Biden administration, President Biden met with the UAE leaders and asked for assurances that they would no longer be providing weapons to this murderous group and thought he received those assurances. But the reality is, right at the end of the Biden administration, at my request, I asked for a briefing, and it turns out that the U.S. has determined that the UAE is continuing to provide weapons to this murderous group, which the United States government has found is committing genocide in Darfur as we speak. And so on top of all the corruption that's part of this deal, we have the Trump administration greenlighting an arms transfer to the UAE. At the same time, the UAE is transferring weapons to a murderous group in Sudan that is committing genocide. And here's what the State Department's own assessment says. The Rapid Support Forces and allied militias have systematically murdered men and boys, even infants, on an ethnic basis, and deliberately targeted women and girls from certain ethnic groups for rape and other forms of brutal sexual violence. Those same militias have targeted fleeing civilians, murdering innocent people escaping conflict, and preventing remaining civilians from accessing life-saving supplies. So there are lots of reasons we shouldn't go forward with this arms sale, partly because it's part of an overall corrupt deal with the Trump administration, but also because of the UAE's ongoing actions. So let me really close with this, Mr. President. We do expect the President of the United States, when he travels overseas, to be looking out for American interests. In this case, it's very clear President Trump was going out to look out for his own interests. In the case of the Middle East, it doesn't even seem that he raised the issue of the genocide in Sudan during his trip to the UAE while he was following up on the corrupt deals. And the president also, I think people will remember, said he was going to end the war in Gaza on day one, that he was going to bring back the hostages and end the absolute awful humanitarian disaster we're witnessing right now with literally hundreds of thousands, not millions, of innocent Palestinians dying of starvation, civilians. But instead of looking at working the Gaza issue or these other foreign policy priorities, the president was there for himself. And it's sending a terrible message. Other countries are getting that message. Reports say that Vietnam is making way for a Trump Gulf complex to get lower tariffs, and that Serbia is demolishing a historic building to fast-track a Trump hotel in Belgrade. Mr. President, we cannot allow our foreign policy to be corrupted in this way. And the one way we can send that signal and that message right now is by voting yes on these joint resolutions of disapproval on these arms sales, because they're part of the overall corrupt package. So I urge my colleagues to vote yes, and I now yield the floor to my friend, the senator from Vermont.
Well, let me thank Senator Van Hollen for his leadership on this important issue, and thank Senators Murphy, Kaine,